The food on the table has been warm for a while now. You are both sitting across from each other, and the light overhead is soft, and the room is quiet in the way that rooms become quiet when two people have run out of easy things to say. There is a fork in your hand. You put it down without noticing. Outside, a car moves past, and the sound of it comes through the window for a moment and then leaves. The evening carries on around you both without asking how you are doing. You look up at the same moment, and the other person looks slightly away. And there is a small recognition in that, a small, ordinary reminder that something has shifted between the two of you. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but the way a room changes temperature without anyone opening a window. You are not angry. They are not angry. The meal is fine. The day was ordinary, and yet there is something here, sitting between the plates, taking up more space than it should. You have been in this chair before, in other meals, in other evenings, and you know what this feeling is, even if you would struggle to name it cleanly. It is not a fight waiting to happen. It is not a problem that needs to be solved tonight. It is something quieter than that. A feeling that a certain kind of conversation has not happened in longer than either of you could easily say, and that both of you have noticed this, and that neither of you has found the right moment to begin it. The words exist. You have formed them, half-formed them, reached for them on other nights, and then let them go. Not out of fear exactly, more out of a kind of tiredness that makes the distance between what you feel and what you are able to say feel wider than it once did. You take a sip of water. Across the table they do the same. The sound of it is very small in the room. Somewhere in the apartment, something settles. A pipe, a floorboard. And then the silence comes back, a little heavier than before, and neither of you moves to fill it. You reach for something small to say. You mention the weather, or the week, or something that happened that day at work. The words arrive, and they are fine words, true enough, but they carry only the surface of what the evening actually holds. The other person responds in kind. There is a brief warmth in it, a small pocket of ease, and then it passes, and the room returns to what it was, and you are both sitting across from each other again. And the unspoken thing is still there, still patient, still quiet, waiting in the way that things wait when they have learned how to be still. That patient, quiet thing has a history, and the history is not dramatic. It did not begin with a single argument or a single moment of withdrawal. It began the way most distance begins, slowly, without announcement, in the accumulation of small choices to say less rather than more, to wait for a better time, to let a difficult feeling pass rather than name it while it was still present. There was a period, earlier, when the two of you talked differently, not about larger things necessarily, but with a different quality of attention. There were evenings when a conversation would begin from nowhere and go somewhere unexpected, when one of you would say something and the other would understand it immediately, and that understanding would feel like a small confirmation that the connection between you was real, was present, was alive. Those evenings still happen sometimes, but less often than they did, and when they do happen, there is something slightly effortful about them now, a slight awareness that you are both trying, which is something you never used to notice because the trying was invisible. It is hard to say when it changed. It was not a moment. It was a season or a series of seasons. There was a period of more pressure at work, for one of you and then for both, And during that period, the evenings became shorter in a certain way, not in hours, but in openness. There was less energy for the kind of conversation that requires you to arrive fully present, that requires you to put the day down before you speak. And so you both arrived with the day still on, and the conversations that happened in those months were the conversations that required less, the practical things, the logistics, the small updates that keep a shared life running. And that was not a failure. It was a reasonable response to limited energy. But the habit of it stayed even after the pressure eased. The shorter conversations became the regular ones. The easier surface became the one you both returned to, not because you had decided to, but because it had become the path of least resistance, and the path of least resistance, taken often enough, becomes the path. And now there is the table, and there is the warmth of the food between you, and the soft overhead light, and the sound of the evening outside moving at its own pace without asking anything of either of you. And there are things inside you, real things, true things, things that have accumulated over weeks or months without being released, that you have not said aloud, and you are not sure anymore exactly when you stopped saying them, only that you did, and that the other person stopped too, and that the gap created by this mutual silence is now wide enough to feel like furniture in the room, something you both move around without acknowledging. You look at them, and you notice small things, the way they hold their glass, the slight shift in their expression when they are somewhere else in their thoughts, the tiredness in their eyes that you recognize because it matches your own. You know this person. You know the shape of their presence in a room. And still the words stay where they are. There is a particular feeling in this, in knowing someone well enough to recognize their silence, and still not knowing how to reach across the table into it. It is not a cold feeling. It is actually quite warm in its way, which makes it harder. If it were cold, if there were anger or resentment sitting at the table with you, the path forward would be clearer. But this is something else. This is two people who still want something from each other, still carry something for each other, still notice each other in the quiet ways that matter, and who have somehow arrived at a shared difficulty in reaching across the ordinary distance of an evening meal and saying the thing that is actually true. The difficulty is not between you. The difficulty is in the space that daily life builds between people over time, quietly, the way sediment settles. Sediment is the right word for it. Not rubble, not wreckage, just the fine, soft accumulation of everything that was felt and not spoken, carried and not set down, noticed and not named. It does not press against you. It simply settles. And the longer it settles, the more normal the surface above it begins to feel, until the surface feels like the whole thing, until you have almost forgotten that there was once more depth here, more ease of movement, more willingness to go below. You are not living on the surface because you chose it. You are living on the surface because arriving here was gradual enough that neither of you quite registered the moment you stopped going deeper, because the days kept arriving one after another, and you both kept moving through them, and the space below stayed where it was, quiet and unvisited, and yet you register it now, sitting in this particular quiet, in this particular light. Something about the stillness of the evening brings it into focus. During the day there is always something to do, somewhere to put your attention, something to manage or move toward or respond to. But here, in the pause between one thing and the next, when the meal is nearly finished and the evening is still open and there is no particular task waiting at the edge of it, here there is a clarity about the distance. Not a frightening clarity, a quiet one. The kind that does not demand anything from you, except that you sit with it for a moment and feel how true it is. Feel how long it has been true. Feel the mild ache of recognizing something you have been carrying without looking at it directly. You think about what you would say if you began. You try the words out somewhere inside yourself. Arrange them, consider how they would land, and then something in you hesitates. Not because the words are wrong, but because beginning a real conversation, the kind that reaches below the surface and touches what is actually there, requires arriving with both hands open. It requires a particular kind of energy and a particular willingness to not know how the other person will respond. And some evenings that arrival is possible. And some evenings the day has already taken the thing that makes it possible. And what is left is something closer to a wish than a readiness. You are not sure which kind of evening this is. And so you wait, the way you have waited before, for the right moment, which has a habit of staying just slightly out of reach. Across the table, there is a person who is very likely doing the same, holding something, composing something, testing words that have not yet crossed the distance between their interior and yours. You cannot know this for certain, but you have been with this person long enough to read the particular quality of their silence, long enough to feel the difference between a silence that is resting and a silence that is carrying something. And this silence carries something. You can feel the weight of it from where you sit, familiar and close, like a sound you have heard before in a different room. What is strange about this is how ordinary it looks from the outside. A table, two people, a meal, the light overhead. Nothing about the scene would suggest that anything significant is happening here, that anything is being felt, that the quiet between two people contains something real and unresolved. People have sat across from each other like this in every city, in every decade, in every language. The situation is not special, and yet the feeling inside it is precise and personal and fully your own, shaped by the specific history between the two of you and no one else. The ordinariness of it is part of what makes it hard to speak. It does not feel like the kind of moment that calls for a significant word. It feels too quiet for that. Too small, and so the significant word stays where it is, and the evening continues, and the silence between you holds its shape. That silence has a shape, and the shape is not emptiness. It is something more textured than that. Inside it, there are things the two of you share without speaking. A shorthand built from years of shared mornings and shared routines, from knowing how the other person takes their coffee, and what kind of tired they look like after a particular kind of day. There is a warmth in that knowledge, even now, even here. You look at the person across from you, and you see the full accumulation of who they are. Not just tonight's version, but all the other versions too. The one you first knew, the one they were during the harder years, the one they become when something is genuinely funny, the one they become when something is wrong, and they are not ready to say so. You carry all of those versions alongside the present one, and that carrying is its own form of intimacy, quieter than words and perhaps older than most of the words you have ever exchanged. And still the words stay where they are. Still the evening continues, and the light does not change, and the distance between your chair and theirs does not close. There is no dramatic reason for this. There is only the ordinary difficulty of finding a way across the gap between what is felt and what is said, when both people are tired and the evening is quiet and the day has already asked a great deal. There is something particular about unspoken words between people who know each other well. With strangers, silence carries no history. But between two people who have shared time and proximity and difficulty, between two people who have woken up in the same rooms and moved through the same years and seen each other at the worst and plainest and most ordinary hours, silence has weight. It holds memory. The unspoken word between close people is not just absent sound. It is the presence of everything that was almost said. It is the conversation that reached the surface and then pulled back. It is the question asked internally across months without an answer arriving from the outside. Silence like this is not empty. It is full in a way that emptiness never is. Full of the specific contours of a specific relationship, full of a specific difficulty, and a specific history, and a specific evening that both of you are living through at the same time, in the same room, at the same table. You think about earlier conversations, not the large ones, not the arguments, but the smaller ones, the ones that happened while driving somewhere together, or while doing something ordinary in the kitchen, or in those half-awake moments before sleep when the guard comes down a little and the real thoughts surface more easily. There were moments in those conversations where something was nearly reached, where you both came close to saying the true thing rather than the approximate thing, the safe version that travels more easily between people. And then something interrupted, a sound, a turn in the road, a descent into sleep, and the conversation moved on and left what was nearly said behind, sent it back to wherever it lives inside you. Patient, intact, not gone. You have noticed this pattern before. The nearness and then the interruption. And you wonder sometimes whether what looked like an interruption was actually a relief. Whether some part of you both recognized that the nearness was more than either of you was quite ready for in that particular moment. You wonder this without judgment. You have come to understand that readiness is not always something you can manufacture. Sometimes it arrives on its own schedule, and sometimes it does not arrive at all, and the thing you were almost ready to say dissolves slowly back into the interior without ever having been received by another person. There are things you want this person to know. Not complicated things, not dramatic revelations, ordinary things, gentle things. Things that somehow never make it into the ordinary language of a shared life. Things like, I notice the effort you make and I do not always say so. Things like, there are days when I am more tired than I show, and some of that tiredness has nothing to do with work and everything to do with carrying things I haven't put down. Things like, I miss a version of this that I cannot exactly name, a version that may not have disappeared, that may simply be waiting underneath the weight of the present, and I do not know how to find it. And I wonder sometimes whether you feel the same, and I am afraid to ask because I don't know what I would do with the answer. These are not accusations, they are not complaints, they are simply true, and they live inside you the way true things live, quietly, persistently, declining to fade the way you might hope they would, if you gave them enough time and enough ordinary evenings. You wonder whether they have their own version of this, whether, across the table from you, They are holding their own collection of unspoken things, their own careful accumulations, their own words that have formed and dissolved and formed again across different nights. You believe they do. You believe it the way you believe something you cannot verify but understand from long proximity to a person. A knowledge that comes not from a conversation, but from the accumulated texture of years spent in close quarters with someone, watching how they hold their difficulty, recognizing the particular set of their expression when they are somewhere else in their thoughts. And this belief that you are both on the same side of the same difficulty, that neither of you is alone in the silence the two of you have made, does not resolve the evening, but it changes the quality of it, softens it slightly, makes the table feel a little less wide, the gap a little less fixed. Outside, the night has settled into itself. The sounds from the street have thinned. The apartment around you holds its usual stillness. The two of you have moved through the meal without naming what was present, and the evening will continue in this way, will fold into night, will become tomorrow and the day after, and the accumulation of more ordinary evenings in which something real sits just below the surface of the ordinary. And yet there is something in this moment, in the space just before the table is cleared and the evening moves on, something that is not resolution, but is also not nothing. A kind of mutual recognition, wordless but real, that you are both here, that you are both aware, that the distance between you is not indifference, but something much closer to two people who have not yet found the way back to each other, and who have not, despite everything, stopped wanting to. The table gets cleared slowly, and neither of you says much, and that too feels familiar. The way the body continues when the interior is still somewhere else. The plates move from one surface to another, and the kitchen sounds begin. Small sounds, ordinary sounds. The sounds of two people resuming the practical rhythm of a shared life, while something unresolved still sits quietly in the room behind them. And somewhere in those sounds, there is something almost tender. Not the tenderness of resolution, not the tenderness that follows a real conversation that finally said what it needed to say, but the older, quieter tenderness of two people moving through the same space at the end of a long day, still managing the evening together, still within reach of each other, even when the words are far away. You pass something across the counter. They take it. The moment is nothing. The moment is also something. Later, when the kitchen is quiet again, and the lights in the apartment have been turned down, one by one, you will sit somewhere, and the evening will settle over you the way evenings do. Gradually, without announcement, the day becoming something that happened and is now behind you, and the unspoken thing will still be there, resting where it has been resting, patient as it has always been. It does not press. It does not demand. It only waits, the way things wait, when they have been waiting long enough to know that you will return to them eventually. When the tiredness lifts, or the evening is right, or the moment arrives carrying enough openness in it to hold what needs to be said. You think about the meal, the table, the particular quality of that quiet. You think about the other person's face in the soft light, and the way they held their glass, and the small familiar tiredness behind their eyes that you recognize because it matched your own. You think about all the evenings that came before this one, all the tables and all the silences and all the words that rose to the surface and then retreated before they could become sound. And you notice, not with regret exactly, but with something that sits close to it, that the distance between two people is not always made of difficulty. Sometimes it is made of ordinary life, of tiredness and habit, and the accumulated weight of days that asked more than they returned. And sometimes the most honest thing two people can do is sit across from each other in the quiet and feel the full weight of what is there, without pretending it is not, without forcing it into words before the words are ready, without asking the evening to hold more than it can. The table was wide tonight, but you were both at it, and that, in its own quiet way, is not nothing.